That morning, HOA President Veronica Steinberg rolled up with 3 charter buses crammed full of her rich buddies to fish in my private lake. I watched her $1,000 designer heels sink deep into the mud as she shrieked, "You can't exclude us from community property." The sheer audacity boiled my blood. For 2 years, this entitled witch had tried stealing my family's 60-year legacy with fake surveys, lies, and bully lawyers. Now, she was trespassing with 40 strangers, trashing my grandpa's hand-built dock while bus diesel fumes choked the air. But she had no idea I wasn't the pushover she thought. As a retired electrician, I had a few tricks up my sleeve. What happened next? She lost everything: her status, her friends, her precious HOA throne. Moral: never mess with a man defending his legacy. What would you do if Karens invaded your backyard with busloads of strangers? Drop your city below. Bet half of you have HOA horror stories. I'm Marcus Fontaine, 52, and for 30 years I made my living solving electrical problems nobody else could figure out. Complex industrial systems, emergency repairs, the kind of work that teaches you patience, precision, and how to outthink people who think they're smarter than you. Sold my contracting business last year and moved back to the family property full-time. 40 acres of paradise with an 8-acre spring-fed lake that's been ours since 1962. My grandfather Frank bought this land when it was scrub brush and a tiny spring, then spent 15 years of weekends hand-digging that lake, laying every dockboard, building everything you see. The sound of gravel crunching under my boots on those same paths, that's my childhood soundtrack. The smell of pine mixed with clean lake water hits different when you know your grandfather's sweat built it. The rough bark of the old oak where he carved our initials in 1975. I still run my fingers over those grooves and remember his lessons about standing up to bullies. 10 years ago, Willowbrook Estates HOA sprouted around my property like expensive weeds. 47 houses worth $800K to $1.2 million, filled with retirees chasing the lakefront lifestyle. Of course, my property predates their HOA by decades. I'm not a member, never signed anything, and legally they have zero authority over my land. The lake? Completely mine according to every survey that matters. For years, everything was fine. New neighbors waved, complimented the view, asked about fishing. Normal small-town stuff. Then Veronica Steinberg moved in 3 years ago and turned my peaceful retirement into a war zone. Picture this: 58-year-old real estate attorney from California, drives a white BMW she washes obsessively, carries a legal pad like it's a loaded weapon. Within 6 months, she'd bullied her way into HOA presidency. Within a year, she'd terrorized 6 neighbors over garbage cans, fence heights, and non-conforming landscaping. This woman could find legal violations in a church picnic. I minded my own business until last spring, when Veronica showed up with her predator smile and fake concern. "Your lake is creating mosquito breeding conditions that affect our property values," she announced. "You need to install a $15,000 filtration system immediately to address this community health crisis." I walked her to my property stakes, showed her the surveys, explained that spring-fed lakes don't breed mosquitoes, politely declined her generous offer to spend my money fixing her imaginary problem. Big mistake. The harassment started within 48 hours. Anonymous complaints to county health about stagnant water. Mystery inspectors showing up with clipboards and attitudes. The diesel stench from her environmental assessment trucks poisoning my morning coffee routine. When the county inspector finally tested my water, he practically laughed. "This is cleaner than most municipal supplies," he told me. "Whoever's complaining is either ignorant or lying." That's when it clicked. Veronica wasn't concerned about mosquitoes or property values. She wanted something else entirely, and she'd decided a simple retired electrician would roll over and play dead. But here's what she didn't know about electricians. We troubleshoot for a living. We trace problems back to their source, identify the real issue behind the obvious symptoms, and we always have backup plans. Veronica thought she was dealing with some pushover old man who'd cave at the first threat of legal action. What she was actually dealing with was someone who'd spent 3 decades outthinking people who underestimated him, someone who knew how to read schematics, follow paper trails, and wire systems that work exactly like they're supposed to. And after 30 years of emergency calls, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. When someone's trying to electrocute you, you don't just fix the immediate problem. You trace it back to the breaker box and shut down their whole damn system. 2 weeks after that mosquito conversation, Veronica went nuclear. I was sipping coffee on my dock when a white county van roared into my driveway, kicking up gravel like machine gun fire. Right behind it, her BMW, polished to mirror shine and gleaming with malicious intent. She'd filed a formal health department complaint claiming my lake was a stagnant breeding ground threatening community wellness. The audacity made my coffee taste bitter. The inspector, a weathered guy named Dave, climbed out looking embarrassed. "Mr. Fontaine, I'm sorry about this. Got orders to investigate every complaint, but honestly, this feels like rich people drama." Veronica strutted over in her power suit and designer heels, legal pad clutched like a battle axe. Her perfume, something expensive and aggressive, couldn't quite mask the scent of desperation underneath. She supervised Dave's every move with the intensity of a prison warden. For 2 hours, Dave tested water samples, examined the spring filtration, even waded knee-deep to check the source points. His verdict? "This is cleaner than most municipal water supplies. Whoever complained this is stagnant doesn't know lakes from bathtubs." Veronica's face went redder than a stop sign. "That's impossible! I demand a second opinion!" Dave packed his equipment with deliberate slowness. "Ma'am, I've been doing this 23 years. This lake is pristine." But that afternoon brought round two. A certified letter claiming my property violated mysterious watershed protection agreements that somehow I'd never signed because they'd never existed. The legal language was dense enough to choke a lawyer, full of phrases like community environmental obligations and collective resource management. Now, here's something I learned rewiring commercial buildings. When someone throws technical jargon at you to justify nonsense, they're usually hiding a fundamental flaw in their system. So I did what any good electrician does when troubleshooting. I traced the problem back to its source. 3 hours of digging through county databases revealed Veronica's dirty little secret. Her California bar license was under disciplinary review for deliberate misrepresentation of property rights in a real estate deal. This woman had a history of bending legal facts to fit her financial needs. Time for my counterattack. First, I installed professional security cameras, the kind with night vision and motion sensors that back up to cloud storage. If Princess Veronica wanted to play games on my property, every move would be recorded in high definition. Then I replaced my polite private property signs with legal notices citing specific state statutes. Trespassing penalties, $5,000, fine plus damages. False complaint penalties, $50,000, maximum plus attorney fees. I remembered from a commercial job years back that sometimes the best deterrent is showing people exactly what their stupidity will cost them. The fresh laminate smell reminded me of printing electrical diagrams, precise, detailed, and designed to prevent dangerous mistakes. But 3 days later, Dave called with news that changed everything. "Marcus, thought you should know. That Steinberg woman tried to slip me $2,000 to alter my water quality report. Offered it as a consulting fee for additional testing services." My grip tightened on the phone. I'd seen this before during a hospital rewiring job where a contractor tried bribing the electrical inspector. Bribery of a government official carries 5 years in federal prison. Veronica had just escalated from obnoxious neighbor to federal felon. "Please tell me you reported it." "Damn right I did. Internal Affairs wants a formal statement, and they're building a case. But Marcus, watch your back. Someone willing to bribe officials won't stop there." That evening, I sat on my dock watching sunset paint the water gold and crimson. The gentle sound of waves lapping against Grandpa's hand-built shore usually calmed my mind, but tonight it sounded like a timer counting down to something bigger. This wasn't about mosquitoes or environmental concerns. Veronica wanted something specific, and she'd crossed into criminal territory to get it. Time for some detective work. I pulled property records, tax assessments, recent sales data. What I discovered made my electrical instincts buzz like touching a live wire. Every home within a mile had jumped 40% in value over 3 years, with realtors specifically advertising spring-fed lake proximity and exclusive fishing access. But here's where it got interesting. Veronica's financial records showed a woman drowning in debt. Second mortgage, maxed home equity line, leveraged at 95% of her property value. She wasn't fighting me over principles. She was fighting because my lake represented her financial salvation. If she could somehow establish community access rights, every property in Willowbrook Estates would jump another 20% overnight. Her over-leveraged investment would suddenly look genius instead of desperate. Simple contractor math. My grandfather's legacy was worth millions to her, and she planned to steal it one fraudulent legal claim at a time. But Veronica had made one fatal miscalculation. She thought a simple retired electrician wouldn't know how to trace a complex problem back to its source. Time to teach her that some circuits, once you flip the wrong breaker, can't be reset. Veronica's next attack came like a precision missile strike disguised as community service. She organized an emergency neighborhood meeting about shared water resource management at the Willowbrook Clubhouse, complete with official-looking invitations and legal letterhead. Of course, I wasn't invited. Found out when my neighbor Dorothy Lennox called, her 78-year-old voice shaking with fury. "Marcus, get down here now. This witch is telling lies about your family that would embarrass the devil himself." I arrived to find 40-plus residents packed into the clubhouse like sardines, Veronica commanding center stage with the confidence of a courtroom prosecutor. She'd prepared a full PowerPoint presentation, fake historical documents spread across tables, and enough legal jargon to choke a Supreme Court justice. The air reeked of expensive coffee and barely contained greed as neighbors eyed each other, calculating their potential lake access benefits. "Ladies and gentlemen," Veronica announced, clicking to an aerial photo of my property, "what we have here is a textbook case of individual selfishness overriding community rights. This lake has been enjoyed by area residents since the 1940s, decades before any single family claimed exclusive ownership." She clicked to her masterstroke, a yellowed document labeled 1955 Community Fishing Access Agreement. It looked official enough to fool anyone not paying attention to details, but I was paying very close attention, and what I saw made my electrician's instincts scream like a smoke detector. The 1,955 inches document mentioned environmental impact assessments, a concept that didn't exist until the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970. The signatures were obviously photocopied from different sources and pasted together. The paper had been artificially aged with what looked like coffee stains and steel wool scratches. During my contracting years, I'd seen plenty of forged inspection certificates from fly-by-night competitors. This was amateur hour fraud, but packaged with enough official presentation to fool people who wanted to be fooled. She cycled through more evidence: a 1961 watershed agreement referencing GPS coordinates that wouldn't be available to civilians until 1983, and a 1958 community access treaty, allegedly signed by my grandfather using a signature clearly traced from his 1962 property deed. 12 HOA members nodded along like hypnotized chickens, so hungry for lake access they'd swallow any lie that justified their greed. Time to electrocute this fraud show. I stood up in the back. "Excuse me, Veronica, but I'd like to address these fascinating historical discoveries." Her face went white as fresh paint. She clearly hadn't planned on the actual property owner crashing her perjury party. "Mr. Fontaine, this is a private HOA meeting." "About my private property," I interrupted, walking down the center aisle with the deliberate pace of someone about to flip a breaker. "That gives me standing." I connected my phone to her projector and took over her show. First slide: the original 1962 property survey with clear boundary markers. Second, construction photos of Grandpa building the lake, authenticated by the County Historical Society. Third, Dorothy's 40-year collection of neighborhood photos showing zero community lake use. "Now let's examine Veronica's evidence," I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd called out fraudulent work for 30 years. "This 1955 document mentions environmental impact studies, except that term wasn't coined until 1969. This 1961 agreement cites GPS coordinates, but civilian GPS didn't exist until 1983. And this signature from my grandfather? It's obviously traced from his 1962 deed, which anyone can verify at the courthouse." The silence was so complete you could hear people's dreams of lakefront fishing dying. Dorothy stood with the dignity of 8 decades. "I moved here in 1963, 1 year after Frank Fontaine finished that lake. In 40 years, I never saw a single person use it besides the Fontaine family. These historical access rights are pure fantasy." 8 residents immediately switched sides, suddenly remembering they'd always believed in property rights. 4 went neutral, unwilling to pick fights, but Veronica's core supporters, 3 wealthy transplants who'd bought into Willowbrook specifically for lakefront lifestyle bragging rights, doubled down on stupidity. "Anyone can forge old photographs," one muttered. "Absolutely," I agreed, staring directly at Veronica. "Which is why document forgery carries 7 years in federal prison. Amazing what some people risk for a fishing hole." But here's the beautiful part. I'd been recording everything on my phone. Her presentation of forged documents, her false historical claims, her deliberate fraud, all captured in prosecutable quality. As chaos erupted, Veronica made one final desperate play. This isn't over, Fontaine. I'm filing an injunction to prevent you from excluding community members until this is resolved in court. I smiled like an electrician watching someone grab a live wire despite clear warnings. Please do, Veronica. Present your evidence to a real judge. I'm sure they'll find your historical documents absolutely fascinating. The taste of victory was sweeter than my grandfather's homemade fishing bait. Veronica was about to learn that some lies are too big to survive legal scrutiny. Veronica's courtroom threat wasn't empty bluster. Within 72 hours, she'd weaponized the legal system like a guided missile aimed at my property rights. Her first salvo came in the form of a certified surveyor who showed up to correct historical boundary inaccuracies. The man stumbling around my property with outdated equipment looked about as qualified to survey land as a goldfish was to perform surgery. Rick Dawson drove a rusted pickup held together with duct tape and determination, hauling surveying gear that belonged in a museum. While Rick fumbled with a theodolite older than disco music, I ran a quick background check on my laptop. The results made my coffee taste bitter with disgust. This clown wasn't licensed to survey anything in our state. His Pennsylvania credentials had been revoked for gross incompetence and fraudulent reporting. Yet here he was, measuring my grandfather's legacy with the precision of a drunk meteorologist. By afternoon, Rick had produced his masterpiece of fraud, a corrected survey, claiming the original 1962 boundaries were fundamentally flawed, and my lake extended into community watershed territory. The document looked like something a middle schooler might forge for a history project. Wrong paper stock, impossible measurements, and legal descriptions that referenced streets that didn't exist. But Veronica's real masterstroke came next. She filed a preliminary injunction demanding I stop excluding community members from historically shared water resources until her boundary dispute could be resolved. 47 pages of pure legal fiction, citing the same forged documents from her clubhouse dog and pony show. Then she escalated to psychological warfare, bringing her wealthy friends to fish on my lake without permission. The first invasion happened on a crisp Saturday morning. 12 people in rental cars descended on my property like locusts in designer fishing vests, hauling gear worth more than most people's cars. They set up folding chairs on my dock, scattered energy bar wrappers around my fish cleaning station, and cast expensive lines into water that belonged to my family. The smell of their imported sunscreen mixed with diesel fumes from their idling BMWs turned my peaceful morning into an olfactory assault. I walked down with my camera, documenting every entitled face and out-of-state license plate. "Excuse me, but you're trespassing on private property." A woman in a $300 fishing outfit that had never seen actual fish laughed at me. Veronica Steinberg gave us permission. The court case means we can use this lake until everything's settled legally. That's when Veronica's true strategy crystallized in my mind like ice forming on winter water. She wasn't just trying to steal my property through legal manipulation. She was creating adverse possession evidence by establishing a pattern of community use. I'd encountered this scam years ago during a commercial electrical job where a neighboring business tried claiming part of my client's parking lot. The legal principle is simple but dangerous. If someone uses your land openly for 7 years while you don't object, they can actually claim ownership in court. The only defense is immediate, documented objection to every single trespass. So I did exactly that. Handed each trespasser a written notice citing specific state trespassing statutes, photographed them receiving the notices, and gave them 15 minutes to vacate before I involved law enforcement. They left muttering about crazy hermits and legal rights, but the precedent was set. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more groups arrived with identical stories. Veronica had convinced them that pending litigation somehow granted temporary access to my property. My motion-activated sprinkler system became the MVP of property defense. Nothing ruins a trespasser's designer outfit quite like an unexpected Arctic shower while they're trying to steal your base. The sound of Veronica shrieking when she got drenched during one of her boundary inspections was sweeter than church bells on Sunday morning. But my real counterpunch came in the form of Jennifer Walsh, a licensed surveyor with 20 years of experience and a reputation for forensic precision. Her analysis of Rick's fraudulent survey read like a comedy routine written by a physics professor. The submitted measurements contained computational errors of such magnitude, Jennifer wrote in her official report, that the described property boundaries would require the lake to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Several corner markers are plotted in locations that would violate basic laws of geometry. She'd essentially proven that Rick's survey was not just wrong, it was physically impossible. Armed with Jennifer's devastating professional analysis, I filed my own legal motion. not just to dismiss Veronica's ridiculous injunction, but to have her sanctioned for knowingly presenting fraudulent evidence to the court. In our state, that carries both criminal penalties and mandatory reimbursement of all attorney fees. But the most satisfying moment came when I realized Veronica had made a critical tactical error. By bringing witnesses to her fraudulent activities, she'd created a paper trail that would be impossible to deny in court. The woman who thought she could outsmart a simple electrician was about to discover that some circuits, once overloaded, explode with spectacular results. The breakthrough came from pure electrical troubleshooting instinct. When a circuit keeps shorting out, you don't just fix the obvious problem. You trace it back to find the real cause hidden in the system. I was researching property records at the county clerk's office when the scent of expensive perfume and desperation announced Veronica's arrival. She settled 2 tables away, hunched over documents with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. What caught my attention wasn't her presence. It was what she was researching. Not boundary disputes or environmental regulations, but ownership histories, tax assessments, and recent sales data for every property within 5 miles of my lake. When she stepped outside for a phone call, I moved closer to her abandoned paperwork. What I saw made my coffee taste like liquid betrayal. Handwritten notes covered the margins. Market value $3.2 million. Forced sale target $1.8 million. Development potential. Luxury lakefront subdivision. Community access, equal sign, 60% value reduction. She wasn't trying to steal my property for community access. She was orchestrating a real estate scam to force me into selling below market value so she could flip it for massive profit. I followed her outside and positioned myself behind a concrete pillar where her voice carried clearly in the crisp morning air. "The property is absolutely perfect," she was saying into her phone. 8-acre spring-fed lake, 40 acres of pristine land, zoned for residential development. The old fool has no idea he's sitting on a gold mine. The sound of traffic couldn't drown out her predatory excitement. "No, he won't sell voluntarily. That's why we're manufacturing the legal crisis. Once I establish community access rights through litigation, his property value crashes by 60%. He'll sell just to escape the harassment and legal bills." My grip tightened on the pillar's rough concrete surface as she continued. "I've got 3 developers bidding against each other. Minimum $2.8 million for immediate cash purchase. After all expenses, I'm looking at $450,000 profit. Maybe more if they get into a bidding war." But then her tone shifted to something resembling panic. "The California situation is critical now. The state tax board filed liens totaling $387,000, and they're threatening criminal prosecution for tax evasion. If I don't generate major cash flow within 60 days, they'll seize all my assets and freeze my accounts." Tax evasion, asset seizure. This woman wasn't operating from greed. She was drowning in financial quicksand and trying to use my family's legacy as her life preserver. Plus, the bar disciplinary board is scheduling hearings on the Newport Beach fiasco. If they revoke my license, I'm finished. This lake property flip is my only chance to get ahead of the legal bills. I walked back inside with crystal clarity about the real game being played. Veronica wasn't a powerful attorney bullying a helpless retiree. She was a desperate criminal using legal harassment to steal my property and save her collapsing career. That evening, I channeled 3 decades of electrical detective work into tracing Veronica's financial circuitry. Public records, court documents, licensing boards, bankruptcy databases. I followed every digital trail like hunting down a short in a complex industrial system. The truth was uglier than corroded wiring. California tax liens, $387,000. Credit card judgments, $156,000. Unpaid legal settlements, $89,000. Her law practice was circling the drain after multiple ethics violations and client complaints. But the smoking gun was a sealed settlement from 2019 where she'd paid $95,000 to avoid criminal prosecution for targeting elderly property owners through systematic harassment designed to force below-market property sales. I wasn't Veronica's first victim. I was her latest mark in a pattern of predatory behavior spanning multiple states. The woman who thought she was hunting a naive old man had just walked into the crosshairs of someone who knew how to trace problems back to their source and permanently disconnect the power. Game over, Veronica. Time to wire up the perfect trap. After 30 years of managing complex electrical projects, I knew the secret to bringing down sophisticated scammers. Assemble the right team, use the right tools, and let your opponent's desperation do most of the work. My first call went to Dorothy Lennox, my 78-year-old neighbor who'd become my unofficial war counsel. Dorothy possessed the most dangerous weapon in any community conflict, a memory like a steel trap backed by 40 years of obsessive documentation. "Marcus, I've been praying for this conversation," she said when I explained Veronica's real estate scam. The relief in her voice was palpable. "That woman reminds me of the con artists who tried stealing Depression-era farmland through legal trickery. I've got photographs, property records, and neighborhood newsletters going back to 1963. Not once did anyone claim community lake access because it never existed." Dorothy's grandson Tommy became my eyes and ears in the digital age. 19 years old, FAA-certified drone pilot, and capable of producing courtroom-quality video that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Better yet, he understood how to weaponize social media for maximum legal impact. My third recruit was Jake Morrison, investigative journalist for the county paper who specialized in exposing government corruption. Jake had that hungry shark smile reporters get when they smell a career-making story, and Veronica's pattern of targeting elderly property owners was exactly the kind of expose that wins Pulitzer consideration. "I've been tracking similar complaints across 4 counties," Jake explained during our first strategy meeting. The excitement in his voice was infectious. "This isn't just your property, it's part of a systematic fraud operation. If we document the pattern, this becomes a federal story." Finally, I contacted Sarah Blackwood, a property rights attorney who specialized in taking down sophisticated real estate scammers. Sarah had spent 15 years protecting regular people from legal predators, and she possessed that rare combination of courtroom brilliance and street fighter instincts. "What your neighbor's doing has a name," Sarah said, spreading legal documents across my kitchen table like a general planning invasion. "It's called equity stripping, systematically harassing property owners to force below-market sales. When it crosses state lines or involves multiple victims, it becomes federal racketeering. We're talking 20 years in prison, plus forfeiture of all assets." I'd learned about racketeering laws during a commercial job where contractors were running insurance scams. The beauty of RICO charges is that each separate crime, bribery, fraud, extortion, becomes part of a larger conspiracy with devastating penalties. One successful prosecution can destroy an entire criminal operation. Our evidence-gathering strategy was methodical as installing a new electrical panel. Tommy's professional drone surveillance would document every trespass with GPS coordinates and timestamps. My upgraded security system would capture facial recognition footage that could identify co-conspirators. Jake would research Veronica's previous victims and establish the interstate pattern required for federal charges. But my masterstroke was psychological warfare disguised as community outreach. I decided to host a Veterans Memorial Fishing Tournament honoring my grandfather's military service. The event would feature cash prizes, expensive equipment giveaways, and enough publicity to draw every fishing enthusiast within 50 miles. Most importantly, it would coincide perfectly with the HOA annual meeting. The tournament was pure bait for Veronica's desperation. Faced with hundreds of people enjoying her lake while she sat in a boring HOA meeting, she'd be unable to resist bringing her wealthy friends to establish community access rights through mass trespassing. Sarah helped craft legal notices that would be posted throughout the property in letters large enough to read from space. Anyone who trespassed after seeing those warnings would be committing knowing felony violations, the difference between getting a ticket and going to prison. Jake coordinated with 3 local TV stations for a human interest story about veterans, community values, and property rights. They'd be filming general neighborhood footage during tournament weekend, which meant Veronica's crimes would be broadcast live to 200,000 viewers. The financial calculations were equally satisfying. Property owners can recover triple damages for malicious harassment in our state. Veronica's actions had cost me $200,000 in legal fees, security expenses, and reduced property values. Under civil racketeering statutes, that became $600,000 in recoverable damages, plus attorney fees and punitive damages that could reach 7 figures. But the most elegant part of this trap was psychological. I'd learned from decades of electrical troubleshooting that the best way to expose a dangerous system is to stress test it under controlled conditions until it fails spectacularly. Veronica believed she was systematically breaking down a helpless retiree who would eventually surrender his family legacy to escape harassment. What she was actually doing was providing documented evidence of federal crimes to someone who understood exactly how to use that evidence against her. The morning air already carried the sweet scent of approaching justice, mixed with pine and clean lake water that would soon be peaceful again. All I had to do was set the stage and let Veronica's desperation write her own confession. Some electrical fires, once they start, consume everything in their path. Veronica's desperation hit critical mass the weekend of my Veterans Memorial fishing tournament, but what happened next proved she'd completely lost her grip on reality and gave me the smoking gun I needed to destroy her. Saturday morning started perfect. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted from my registration tent as legitimate participants arrived, local veterans, their families, and fishing enthusiasts drawn by Jake's newspaper coverage. By 7 a.m., I had 30 respectful visitors enjoying my grandfather's lake exactly as it was meant to be enjoyed. Then Veronica's invasion force arrived like D-Day in reverse. 3 charter buses roared up my gravel driveway, diesel engines belching black smoke that turned my peaceful memorial into a toxic wasteland. Behind them came a convoy of luxury SUVs and BMWs that looked like a country club evacuation. Veronica emerged from her BMW in designer outdoor gear that screamed, "I paid $800 for this fishing costume." She directed 50-plus people toward my lake with military precision, shouting instructions like a general deploying troops for conquest. "Marcus, darling," she called with poisonous sweetness. "What a wonderful community celebration. We're thrilled to participate in this shared neighborhood tradition." The sheer audacity made my vision blur red. These weren't veterans. They were her wealthy real estate contacts, potential buyers, and investment partners dressed in fishing gear they'd obviously purchased that morning. I approached with my camera and clipboard, documenting every entitled face. "Veronica, this is a private memorial event. You and your people are committing felony trespass on posted private property." She waved a manila folder like it contained the Constitution itself. "Actually, we have legal documentation establishing provisional community access during ongoing boundary litigation. My attorney confirms our rights to participate in neighborhood lake activities." Complete legal fiction, but delivered with courtroom confidence. Her invasion force scattered across my property like designer locusts. They dragged furniture onto my dock, set up elaborate picnic spreads on my lawn, and started casting lines into water sanctified by my grandfather's memory. The sound of clinking champagne glasses and entitled laughter turned my family memorial into their cocktail party. But here's what made me smile despite the rage. Every criminal act was being documented in federal court-quality detail. Tommy's drone captured aerial footage with GPS coordinates showing exact property line violations. My hidden cameras recorded facial recognition data on every trespasser. Jake's media contacts filmed community interest footage that would become Exhibit A in my federal lawsuit. The real escalation came when Veronica started conducting guided tours for potential buyers, pointing out development opportunities and premium waterfront access like she was their licensed real estate agent. That's when I sprung my counter trap. I'd invited Detective Ray Kowalski, a friend from my commercial electrical days, to attend the memorial as my personal guest. Ray happened to be investigating real estate fraud for the county prosecutor's office, and what he witnessed made his day considerably more interesting. "Ma'am," Ray announced, flashing his badge as Veronica concluded her illegal sales pitch. "I'm Detective Kowalski with the County Fraud Unit. I need to speak with you about this property transaction you're discussing." Veronica's face went white as fresh paint. This is just a community gathering." "That's interesting," Ray continued, "because I just recorded you offering to sell property you don't own to people you're encouraging to trespass on private land. In my experience, that's called real estate fraud. The beautiful part? Veronica couldn't run without abandoning her 50 co-conspirators, and she couldn't stay without admitting to federal crimes on camera. But her desperation drove her to make an even bigger mistake. "Detective, you don't understand," she stammered. "I'm representing the community's legal interests in this boundary dispute. These people have legitimate access rights that—" "Are you a licensed real estate agent in this state?" Ray interrupted. "Well, no, but I'm an attorney and—" "Are you representing these people as their attorney in this matter?" "Not exactly, but the community has collective—" "So you're conducting unlicensed real estate activities on property you don't own, with people who aren't your clients, involving land you have no legal right to access?" The silence was so complete you could hear Veronica's career dying. But she wasn't done digging her grave. In a moment of pure panic, she made the confession that would seal her fate. "Look, Detective, this man is trying to prevent legitimate development that would benefit the entire community. His selfish refusal to sell is costing everyone millions in property values." There it was, recorded in high-definition video with multiple witnesses. Veronica admitting her entire harassment campaign was designed to force me to sell my property against my will. Ray smiled like Christmas morning. Ma'am, I think you need to contact your attorney, and everyone else here needs to leave immediately before you're all arrested for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The retreat was spectacular. 50 entitled trespassers fled my property like vampires at sunrise, leaving Veronica standing alone with the ruins of her criminal enterprise scattered around her designer boots. The smell of diesel exhaust and legal consequences filled the air as her convoy disappeared. Veronica had just confessed to organized real estate fraud in front of a detective, multiple cameras, and enough witnesses to fill a courtroom. Some electrical circuits, when they finally overload, explode with enough force to be seen from space. After her public confession to Detective Kowalski, most criminals would disappear into the night. But Veronica Steinberg wasn't most criminals. She was a cornered predator willing to destroy everything in her path to escape the consequences of her own actions. Her final assault began Monday morning with character assassination so vicious it made her previous harassment look like playground teasing. Anonymous flyers appeared on every doorstep in Willowbrook Estates, professionally printed on expensive cardstock with the kind of design polish that screamed serious money behind the operation. They painted me as an unstable veteran with documented PTSD episodes, who was stockpiling weapons and making violent threats against community members. The lies cut deeper than any physical attack. I'd served my country honorably, built a successful business through honest work, and never raised my voice to a neighbor in 30 years. But Veronica understood that in today's climate, accusations travel faster than truth, and fear spreads quicker than facts. Her digital warfare campaign launched simultaneously across multiple platforms. Fake Facebook profiles appeared overnight, posting fabricated stories about my increasingly erratic behavior and concerning late-night activities. Anonymous next-door posts warned neighbors about the dangerous loner, who was becoming hostile toward community safety initiatives. The smell of burning reputation filled my morning coffee as former clients started calling with worried questions about my mental health situation, but Veronica's cruelest blow targeted my veterans' benefits and professional reputation. She filed false reports with the Department of Veterans Affairs claiming I was mentally unstable and potentially violent, demanding immediate suspension of my disability compensation pending psychiatric evaluation. She contacted my former electrical contracting clients, spreading rumors that I'd been displaying concerning behavior that might pose safety risks to their facilities. Watching decades of professional relationships crumble under deliberate lies felt like having my life's work electrocuted by someone who'd never earned an honest dollar. Yet while Veronica was busy destroying my reputation, I was quietly building the case that would destroy her freedom. My silent preparation had been methodical as installing a complex electrical system. Every piece of evidence was cataloged, every witness statement documented, every federal crime cross-referenced with applicable statutes. Sarah had been working 18-hour days preparing what she called the most airtight RICO case I've ever seen. But the most beautiful part of my preparation was a trap Veronica walked into with her eyes wide open. County Commissioner Patricia Wells had been cooperating with federal investigators since Detective Kowalski filed his report. When Veronica requested a private meeting to discuss community development concerns, Commissioner Wells agreed, while wearing an FBI wire that would record every word of Veronica's final confession. The meeting took place at Le Bernardin, an upscale restaurant where Veronica felt comfortable conducting her criminal business. The soft jazz music and clinking crystal provided an elegant soundtrack for federal crimes being committed in broad daylight. Tommy had positioned himself 3 tables away with professional recording equipment that captured every nuance of Veronica's self-destruction. "Commissioner Wells," Veronica began, sliding a thick manila envelope across the white linen tablecloth, "some property owners become obstacles to community progress. This contains $25,000 in appreciation for your support of emergency eminent domain proceedings against the Fontaine property." The casual way she discussed bribing a public official made my blood run cold. This woman had no moral boundaries whatsoever. Commissioner Wells played her part perfectly. What specific concerns justify such extreme measures, Ms. Steinberg? The property owner has been making verbal threats, displaying erratic behavior, and refusing reasonable community cooperation. Frankly, Marcus Fontaine has become a danger to neighborhood stability. Every lie was being recorded in federal court quality. "I have documentation of his aggressive confrontations," Veronica continued, producing a folder of completely fabricated incident reports, plus sworn statements about his threatening behavior and unstable mental condition. She was describing a fictional version of our conflict where she was the heroic community leader protecting innocent neighbors from a dangerous lunatic. But then came the moment that guaranteed her destruction. Look, Patricia, eminent domain can be expedited when property owners are deemed mentally incompetent. A quick psychiatric hold, emergency seizure procedures, and this problem disappears forever. The community gets lakefront development, you get credit for decisive leadership, and I get the commission on a $3 million property flip. The breathtaking cruelty of her plan, having me committed to steal my family's legacy, was spoken with the casual tone of someone ordering dinner. What exactly are you proposing? Commissioner Wells asked. Full cooperation with expedited seizure proceedings for the consulting fee in that envelope, plus $50,000 when the transaction closes? Simple business. The FBI now had recorded evidence of bribery, conspiracy to violate civil rights, abuse of government power, and attempted theft through corruption of official processes. Federal crimes carrying decades in prison. But the most satisfying part was Veronica's complete obliviousness to the trap closing around her. While she thought she was corrupting another government official, she was actually confessing to multiple felonies in high-definition audio quality. The woman who'd tried to steal my grandfather's legacy through lies and legal manipulation had just handed me the evidence to destroy her completely. Some predators are so focused on their prey, they never notice the hunter taking aim. The HOA annual meeting on Saturday evening was supposed to be Veronica's triumphant finale. Instead, it became her public destruction, witnessed by 250 people, and broadcast live across 3 counties. The Willowbrook clubhouse was packed beyond fire code limits. Residents, media crews, county officials, and what Veronica didn't realize were federal agents scattered throughout the crowd like landmines waiting to explode. The air reeked of nervous sweat mixed with overpriced catered coffee as people who'd avoided conflict for years sensed they were about to witness blood in the water. Veronica had choreographed the evening like a legal execution, complete with professional audio-visual equipment, staged expert witnesses, and an agenda designed to railroad through her emergency community safety resolution. She'd filled the front rows with her financial co-conspirators and prepared what she believed would be the death blow to my property rights. She opened with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a rigged game, her $3,000 power suit gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we confront a crisis that threatens every family in Willowbrook Estates. Her PowerPoint presentation was propaganda worthy of a totalitarian regime. Doctored aerial photos labeled my property as environmental hazards, fabricated incident reports describing my escalating violent behavior, professional charts showing how my antisocial property hoarding was destroying everyone's home values. The era of tolerating unstable individuals has ended, she declared, advancing to a slide titled Emergency Psychiatric Intervention and Property Seizure. Community safety demands immediate action. She introduced her star witness with theatrical flourish. Dr. Stephen Walsh, forensic psychiatrist specializing in veteran mental health disorders. The man who approached the microphone looked credible enough to fool a jury. Expensive suit, confident bearing, professional demeanor. What the audience didn't know was that Dr. Walsh was actually her unemployed brother-in-law from Bakersfield, California. Based on extensive behavioral analysis, fake doctor, Walsh testified with practiced authority, Mr. Fontaine exhibits classic symptoms of PTSD-induced paranoid aggression. His property isolation behaviors and social withdrawal indicate dangerous psychological deterioration, requiring immediate intervention. 12 residents nodded like hypnotized sheep, seduced by official-sounding psychiatric jargon that justified their hunger for my lake access. The taste of impending justice was sweeter than my grandfather's honey as I stood up in the back row. Veronica, I'd like to address these expert medical opinions. Her face went white as cemetery marble. She'd clearly expected me to cower at home while she demolished my reputation in absentia. Mr. Fontaine, this is a closed community safety meeting. About my mental health and my property, I interrupted, walking down the center aisle with the measured pace of someone about to flip the master breaker. That gives me standing. I connected my laptop to her presentation system and hijacked her own equipment for my counterattack. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share actual facts about this community crisis. Slide 1. Veronica's California tax liens totaling $387,000, with official state documents showing pending criminal prosecution for tax evasion. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd as they realized their HOA president was a fleeing felon. Slide 2. her bar disciplinary record displaying multiple ethics violations, including the Newport Beach real estate fraud that had triggered her California escape. Slide 3. A timeline of her systematic harassment campaign against my family, complete with dates, documentation, and recorded evidence of each criminal act. But my nuclear weapon was slide 4. High-definition audio from her bribery meeting with Commissioner Wells. Veronica's own voice filled the silent clubhouse. A quick psychiatric hold, emergency seizure procedures, and this problem disappears forever. I get the commission on a $3 million property flip, you get credit for decisive leadership, and everyone wins. The silence was so profound you could hear people's worldviews collapsing in real time. That, neighbors, is your trusted HOA president discussing how to have me falsely committed to steal my grandfather's legacy for personal profit. Dorothy Lennox rose with the moral authority of 8 decades. I've known Marcus Fontaine for 40 years. He's one of the most honorable men in this community. This woman is a predator who's been manipulating all of us. But the evening's climax came when I dropped my final bomb. Oh, and Dr. Stephen Walsh? I clicked to his unemployment records from California. Meet Kevin Steinberg, Veronica's brother-in-law, who's been collecting welfare while committing perjury in our courtroom. The fake expert's face crumbled as his entire charade evaporated on the giant screen. That's when FBI Special Agent Rebecca Martinez stepped into the light, her badge gleaming like a beacon of justice. Veronica Steinberg, you're under arrest for bribery of public officials, conspiracy to violate civil rights, organized real estate fraud, and wire fraud across state lines. The metallic click of handcuffs closing was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. As Veronica was perp-walked past her former victims, 3 TV stations broadcast her destruction live to 200,000 viewers. Her criminal empire collapsed in front of the very community she'd tried to manipulate. The HOA voted unanimously to remove her from all positions and formally apologize for enabling her harassment campaign. Justice, like electricity, always finds the path of least resistance, straight to the truth. 6 months later, the sound of children's laughter mixed with gentle splashing echoed across my grandfather's lake, the sweetest music I'd heard since this nightmare began. What had once been a battlefield was now healing ground where disabled veterans learned to find peace in the same waters that had always brought my family solace. Veronica's legal destruction was swift and absolute. She pleaded guilty to 14 federal charges, including bribery, conspiracy to violate civil rights, organized fraud, and attempted theft through government corruption. The federal judge showed no mercy. 10 years in federal prison, $847,000 in fines and restitution, and permanent disbarment from practicing law anywhere in America. Her fake expert brother-in-law got 4 years for perjury and conspiracy. Her real estate co-conspirators lost their licenses, faced bankruptcy from civil lawsuits, and several fled the state to escape the avalanche of criminal referrals I'd generated. But the most satisfying justice was watching Veronica's financial empire collapse like a controlled demolition. Federal asset forfeiture seized everything: her BMW, her over-leveraged mansion, every bank account she'd used to fund her harassment campaign. The woman who'd tried to steal my grandfather's legacy died broke, disgraced, and forgotten. The real victory, though, was resurrection from the ashes of her criminal enterprise. Dorothy Lennox became HOA president by unanimous vote, bringing 4 decades of neighborhood wisdom and enough moral authority to prevent future Veronicas from taking root. Her first official act was presenting me with a formal community apology and a service award for protecting property rights for every resident. The new leadership immediately passed the Fontaine Protection Protocols, ironclad rules preventing harassment of property owners, requiring transparent financial reporting, and establishing an ombudsman to investigate complaints before they escalated to legal warfare. My property values didn't just recover, they exploded. National media coverage of my victory made Willowbrook Estates famous as the community where individual rights triumphed over systematic fraud. Realtors now advertise where property rights are protected, and home values jumped 40% across the entire development. But the most meaningful change was personal. The stress and isolation that had poisoned my retirement dissolved like morning mist off calm water. Neighbors who'd avoided me during Veronica's reign now stopped by with fishing stories, homemade cookies, and requests for advice about protecting their own rights. This community healing inspired something beautiful: the Frank Fontaine Memorial Conservation Initiative, funded by my lawsuit settlement and matching donations from residents eager to make amends for their silence during the harassment. We established a $15,000 annual scholarship for students studying environmental science, ensuring my grandfather's hand-built lake would inspire future conservation leaders. We also created a therapeutic fishing program for disabled veterans, complete with accessible docks and adaptive equipment that helps wounded warriors rediscover peace one cast at a time. The scent of barbecue smoke and sound of family laughter now fill weekend air where diesel fumes and entitled arguments once poisoned paradise. Our conservation festivals draw families from across the county to learn watershed protection, sustainable fishing, and why private property rights are essential to environmental stewardship. Jake Morrison's investigative series won a state journalism award and inspired legislation protecting property owners from HOA abuse. Sarah Blackwood became the region's premier property rights attorney, using Veronica's prosecution as a template for defeating similar scams in 6 states. Tommy launched a thriving security consultation business protecting elderly property owners from fraud, combining his technical skills with street wisdom about documenting harassment campaigns. His work has already saved 15 families from Veronica-style schemes. Detective Kowalski got promoted to sergeant and now heads the county's new elder fraud task force, using our case as training material for identifying real estate predators. On quiet mornings, I sit on my grandfather's hand-built dock watching sunrise paint the water gold and crimson, listening to peaceful sounds of community restored. The rough bark of our carved oak still bears initials from 1975, reminding me that some legacies are worth any fight. Every ripple carries Grandpa's lesson about bullies. The best way to stop predators is shining enough light that they can't hide in shadows anymore. Veronica thought she was hunting a helpless old man, but walked into the crosshairs of someone who understood that justice, like electricity, always finds its way to the truth. What would you do if someone tried stealing your family's legacy? Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. Some of your stories might be crazier than mine. And smash that subscribe button for Karen's Stories, because next week I'm exposing the neighbor who claimed he owned half my driveway. Spoiler, that didn't end well for him either.